Hey, everybody. Today is the next installment of our Life Unleashed series. And I am excited to be talking with you from southern Utah, right outside Zion National Park, where we were hanging out and exploring on our e-bikes today. So I would love for you, if you're here, to introduce yourself. So tell us your name, your location, and one wild and crazy goal that you want to accomplish in your lifetime. Okay. And this is the Life Unleashed series. So we're focused on letting go of societal expectations and designing the life that we want. And here at the Pioneers, we ascribe to the slow fi philosophy, which means we're building and using financial freedom to design a life that we truly love. And our goal is to help you do the same. So, if you're just joining us, I would encourage you to open up the YouTube comment section for this live and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and one wild and crazy goal that you want to accomplish in your lifetime. So for me, one of the wild and crazy goals that I would love to accomplish in my lifetime is to travel to 100 countries. So if you have a wild and crazy goal, put that in the YouTube comment section. And while you're doing that, I'll share a little more context about the Life Unleashed content series. So many people, when they first learn about financial independence or personal finance, think about it in this like all or nothing mindset. So I'm either set financially and never need to work again, or I need to work long hours and grind it out at a job that I don't really like, right? We think it's one or the other. Um, but I'm actually here to tell you that there's a ton of gray area. And if you're here on this live, the likelihood is that you already have a lot more options than you think. Whether you're paying off debt, have solid emergency savings, or whether you've reached Coast Fi or beyond, you have options. And when we realize that we have options, it can be scary and overwhelming. It can bring up a lot of fears and a lot of limiting beliefs, which is exactly what we're going to talk about during this live conversation. And some of these examples are, what if I decide to make a change and then regret it later? Or what if something catastrophic happens and I lose everything? Or even, feeling like we don't actually deserve to live the life that we currently have, or a life that's better that we currently have. So yeah, I want to welcome everyone. If you haven't introduced yourself yet, please do so. I see Marion, who's currently in Oklahoma for 3 months on a work assignment, but originally from Colorado. A crazy goal is 1 year on a walkabout. Marion, can you tell us what a walkabout is? I feel like I don't know that terminology, and I probably should. Um, and we have Joey here from Minnesota, and wants to travel to every state in the US. That's a fantastic goal. I have that one as well. We have Rosie from the Bay Area, and Rosie's wild goal is to build a beach house in the Philippines and semi-retire there in 6 years. That's awesome. That is a fantastic and very specific, wild and crazy goal. Thank you, Rosie, for sharing that. And we have Kristen from Minnesota, and she wants to meet a baby porcupine or a porcupet. That is awesome. And Connie from Tampa wants to be a snowbird eventually and to go on Deal or No Deal Island and win. That sounds awesome. Rosie also wants to visit every country in the world. I love that. And then I see we have Katie from Australia and wants to do some long distance walks, including the Pacific Crest Trail, which is just one of many. And Marion jumped in to tell us what a walkabout is, which is vagabonding or visiting different countries. So I think a walkabout is also maybe what I would call nomadic travel. So awesome. So thank you so much for joining us today. If you're just arriving, tell us a wild and crazy goal that you have. And we're talking about that right now because we're going to dive into limiting beliefs, right? Because when we start to think about these wild and crazy goals that we have, limiting beliefs pop up. Okay, so what we're going to cover today are what limiting beliefs are and why we have them, how to identify your limiting beliefs, and then I'm going to walk you through 6 strategies to work through them with examples from the community. So I had a number of folks send me examples of their limiting beliefs, and I'm going to use those to talk through it. And make sure that you stick around until the end, because one person who submitted a limiting belief will be actually joining me live to walk through the 6 strategies. And her limiting belief is I shouldn't spend money because my income is lower, right? Since I started my business. So if you are thinking about something like that, definitely stick around. And then I see Teresa from Wisconsin and who wants to bike across Europe. That sounds awesome. Okay, so let's dive in to talk about what limiting beliefs are. And one thing that I would actually love for you to do, like as I'm talking, if you have any limiting beliefs that you're like, this is a limiting belief, just drop that into the comments, because I'm going to also be addressing a whole bunch of them, as many as possible as we can get through on this call to talk through how I would work through these strategies. Okay, so just feel free to share any of those in the chat whenever. And if you have questions, put those in the comment section as well as we go. So let's dive in so what are limiting beliefs? So limiting beliefs are things that you believe to be true about yourself, others, or how the world works that limit you from taking action and achieving your full potential. Okay, so it's something that you believe about yourself, others, or how the world works. Okay, and I'm going to share some examples of limiting beliefs that have come up in my own life that have prevented me for at least a period of time from taking action. And if there are any of these limiting beliefs that I say that resonate with you, just drop a number 1 into the comments. Okay, I want to see how many people resonate with the limiting beliefs that I've had. So the first one is my situation is just fine. If I leave, I'll probably just get into a worse situation. And this was specifically regarding the full-time toxic job that it took me way too long to leave. Another limiting belief that I had was if I change jobs, it has to be for something with a higher salary. Right? It wasn't even in my mind as an option. Like I had to make more money if I was going to change jobs. Okay. Another one was I don't deserve to experience happiness when other people in the world are suffering. Okay. So this is one that took me many, many, many years to unpack. And somebody who submitted a limiting belief has a similar one. And so I'm excited to talk through that. Another one that I had was someone's already done that before. What could I possibly add? Or if here's one that came up when I was originally starting my business in 2020 is if I don't know if something will be successful, it will be a waste of my time to try. right? All of those things are limiting beliefs. And I see Rosie actually shared a limiting belief, and we'll see if we can get to this one. What if I scale back and I fail? Right? This is very similar to one that we're going to talk about here in a moment, which is what if I scale back and then regret it later? Okay. And I see from Marion saying, can I really leave for a whole year? I did a month, but a year is another story, right? Is it? That's a great question to ask. Okay. So if you have other limiting beliefs, pop them in to the chat, and I'm going to talk a little bit through about why we have limiting beliefs. Okay. So I think it's important to understand the purpose of them, right? So the reality is that our brain, right, or our limbic system, or what some people call our lizard brain, is trying to keep us safe, right? Safety is the priority. And so limiting beliefs are a natural response to perceived danger, right? And this natural response has served us well in so many situations as humankind has evolved. But in this day and age, our brains can get it wrong, right? We can shy away and perceive danger when it's not actually there, right? And we shy away from things that would not actually harm us. Okay. And so that's an important thing. I sometimes like to think about it as, when I was working through and dealing with the severe anxiety that I've experienced, one thing that I learned that was really helpful was the difference between fear on the one hand and anxiety on the other, right? So fear is an important feeling, right? That can be telling us, get out of this situation because you are in a situation that could harm you, right? Anxiety is feeling fear when it doesn't actually fit the facts of the situation, right? So it's feeling fear in a situation where the likelihood is that it's not actually going to harm you. Okay. And so I like to think of that as the difference in some ways, right? That fear is an important emotion to pay attention to as long as it fits the facts of the situation, right? But so many times we get these feelings of fear when we don't actually need to be afraid, right? And that's anxiety, and that's, those are limiting beliefs, right? In many situations. There was a study done to evaluate how often imagined calamities actually happen, right? So these things that we're so worried about, the limiting beliefs, what if I scale back and fail, right? What if I take a year off and can never, ever find another job ever again? Right? Or what if something catastrophic happens and I lose everything and I end up like as a bag lady on the street, right? So the study was done. How often do these imagined calamities happen? What they found was that 85% of our worst fears never happen. And of the 15%, right, when they did happen, about 80% of those people realized they could handle it better than expected, or that they learned something valuable from it. And so I did the math on that, and can tell you that that's 97% of the time, right? So 97% of the time it doesn't happen, or it does happen, but you realize you can handle it, and or you learn something valuable from it. Okay. So do we really want something that could happen 3% of the time to really occupy our minds and keep us from moving forward? And then one other thing too that I dug into recently was, okay, limiting beliefs can hold us back from reaching our goals, but what other negative impacts do they have on our lives? Right? Beyond that, they trigger stress hormones, right, that can cause a lot of other serious problems, right? And I was reading that they could cause things like shrinking brain mass or having a lower IQ or increased chances of various diseases like heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, or premature aging. Okay. So if, I hope that those reasons are enough to say, I really need to work through these limiting beliefs. So, what I want to do now is I'm going to actually share. This is good. Okay. This is not what I want. Here we go. Okay. So, I'm going to share with you the 6 strategies to work through limiting beliefs. And I'm going to walk through them pretty briefly. And then we're going to dive into them with examples. Okay. So these are the 6 strategies that I teach in all of my coaching programs, and that I use myself when I'm working through limiting beliefs. So one thing that I do, actually on an annual basis as part of my annual planning process is I figure out what my vision is for the year. I write down what I'm going to do, and what my goals are and how I'm going to carry them out and such. And then I write down at least 50 limiting beliefs. So I look at my goals and I say, what could potentially hold me back? Like, what things do I believe about myself, others, or about the how the world works that could keep me from actually moving forward on this thing? Okay. So I come up with that whole list and then I work through these 6 strategies. Okay. So the first strategy is to flip the script. So for flipping the script, this one, you basically say, okay, I have articulated the limiting belief and I'm going to say the opposite thing and see if I could believe that it's true. Okay. So that's the simplest strategy. And sometimes it works, right? Sometimes if the limiting beliefs are trickier, though, you need to then move on to additional strategies. Okay. The second strategy is to look for evidence. And so then you're going to ask yourself, what evidence do I have that this limiting belief either is true or isn't true? And in what situations or cases? Okay. So we'll talk through that as we're going through examples and it'll become clearer. And then the third strategy is to ask some questions. And I actually once heard someone use an analogy that whenever they're experiencing imposter syndrome, which is one big pesky limiting belief, that they say they like to invite it in for coffee and interrogate. And so I actually really loved that analogy because I sometimes think of it in this way, right? Is that we're asking ourselves questions. We're sitting down with our inner critic and we're asking things like, where did this limiting belief come from? Like, who is actually telling me this thing? Like, who is the voice in my head who is saying this thing to me right now? And where does that come from? Do I actually believe that that's true? Right? Or what if this thing actually did happen? What would I do if that were the case? And would I still be okay? Right. And so those are some of the questions that we can start to ask about these limiting beliefs. And then the fourth strategy is, so once you've worked through the first 3 strategies, what you can then do is say, okay, what's the thing that I want to believe instead? Okay. So you articulate an empowering belief that is, it might be the exact opposite. It might be, a little bit more complicated than that. But you'll articulate that empowering belief. And one important thing to note is it you may logically in your brain say, like, this is the thing that I believe to be true. even if you don't feel it, right? Like you don't like truly deep down like feel it that it's true. That's okay, right? You can have that empowering belief. And then that's why we move into step 5, which is to test it, right? So you're saying, okay, this is the thing that I logically believe is true. Testing it means we move forward as if the new empowering belief is true. And then we build new evidence. Okay. So we see, okay, I'm going to move forward as if this is true and see how it feels and see what happens. Okay. And then the last strategy, which I feel like is incredibly important, is to build a supportive community who can help you work through these limiting beliefs instead of, confiding or surrounding yourself with people who are going to feed these limiting mindsets. Okay. And so that's what you're doing today. So you're building a supportive community around you who is going to help, who can help you think about things in slightly different ways. Okay. And I think this is incredibly important because, actually one of the questions that I like to ask in strategy 4 is, if one of your close friends, like someone you really cared about, came to you and told you that they were having the same limiting belief, what would you tell them? Right. And I feel like that's such a fantastic question because we can often provide a lot more compassion and encouragement to other people who are experiencing the exact same thing as we are, but we are sometimes our own worst critics. And so it's important to surround ourselves with the supportive community who will help us pull us out of that. Okay. So I want to dive into examples because I feel like that's the most important thing that's going to help you to see, like, how would I actually apply these things? And the first example, and I'm going to pull it up onto the screen and then share a little bit more context. So this one came from Connie, and Connie is here. Thank you for sending this in to me. Connie says, we're coast-fi and could make a change with our jobs and just save less. But is worried that she'll regret the decision and feel like they have to pinch pennies. Okay. So one thing that she said in the email that didn't fit here was, but I feel bad that somehow my daughter who's starting high school may miss out on things that we can't afford or not have things like stylish clothing. And like she feels like there's something that's going to push her from saying, oh, we just need to save less, to having it be a slippery slope of like, now we have to pinch pennies because we aren't generating as much income. Okay. So here is how I would start to work through this. Okay. So first, I feel like the important thing to do is actually articulate what is the actual limiting belief here. Okay. And to get really specific about it. Right. And it sounds like the limiting belief here is that it's a slippery slope. And if we scale back, that right now I feel like it's fine. And that will be, that will be fine. But later I'm going to feel like we need to pinch pennies. Right. And then it's going to have an impact on my life, on my family, and make us have, a life that we don't want. Right. So we don't want to get to a place where we feel like we have to pinch the pennies. Okay. So in terms of flipping the script on that, one way that I might approach that is to say, I believe that I have enough that I won't feel like I have to pinch pennies, right? Or I will be able to spend money on the things that I value because I'm getting more into the empowering belief now. So let's just say the opposite, right? I won't regret this decision because I won't feel like I need to pinch pennies. Okay. So then the second strategy is to look for evidence, right? And so, Connie, I would ask you if you were here on the screen with me, and if you want to, you can respond in the comments, is what evidence do you have for or against, right? That if you have a lower income, that you'll feel like you need to pinch pennies. Right. And what evidence do you have that you actually would need to? Right. So say, you scaled back and went part-time or did something different and generated 20% lower income. Could you actually look at the numbers and look at the evidence? Would you actually need to pinch pennies? Right. And then as we get into questions, right? Some of the questions that I would have are, what if you got to a point where that did happen, right? Where you got to a point where you felt like, oh, I need to be pinching pennies. What would you actually do in that situation? Right. So for me, if I was in the situation and I was feeling like, oh, I need to pinch pennies and it's impacting my life in a negative way, and I've certainly been there, I actually would think like for myself, there would be a number of different solutions, right? I think one of them would be to actually go back and look at the evidence. Like, do I really need to be pinching pennies here? Another would be to remember that I'm not making a forever decision, right? So like if I decided to scale back my income, I'm not necessarily saying I'm scaling back my income forever, right? I always, if I got to a point where I was like, hey, I actually want a slightly higher standard of living, and I feel like I'm not able to have that with the income that I've scaled back to, I could choose to increase my income again, right? I could choose to increase hours. I could choose to adjust and do something different. And so, yeah, so I think, and I see Connie, you're jumping in here and saying that you earned 60% of your income and you kept saving and you were just fine, right? So you have some pretty clear evidence. I'm going to pull this up on the screen, right? You have some pretty clear evidence that you scaled back your income and you were okay. And it's interesting. We had a similar situation too. And so when I took my 6-month career break back in 2018, I received disability insurance, which paid about 60%, which is exactly what you're saying. And it was so interesting because we found that we were also still saving and we were spending a lot less because life was better and we weren't spending on convenience or escape. And we were actually able to, that we were spending more in alignment with our values. And so it was okay, right? It was okay to earn less. And then when I had a chance to increase my hours, I actually decided I didn't want to. But it is important to note, and I see that you also commented here, Connie, that it's temporary, right? Like it can be temporary. And it's a great way to think about things as an experiment, to say, I'm going to test this out for 6 months or a year and see how I feel at that point. And then, decide what you want to do from there. And one thing that I've seen is it's really helpful for people to do that, because sometimes we have to like put ourselves through these like mental gymnastics to like get ourselves to be able to scale back. saying like, I'm going to replace my income in a year, right? So for example, like Diana Merriam from the Economy Conference said that. And then she didn't replace her income within the year, but realized like it was a limiting belief that she needed to. Right? She didn't actually need to replace her income. She was operating out of a scarcity mindset, right? And after she was a year in, she said, I don't actually need to do that. Right? And she built confidence in herself and her plan, right? Moving forward. And so, making a small change that's temporary, or could be temporary, is a really helpful way to, start to experiment, but also like you're testing out your new empowering beliefs too, to figure out what you truly believe is true. Okay. So if we went then to articulating an empowering belief, so Connie, I'm actually curious. I would love to hear what you might put in as an empowering belief, into the chat. And then I can share that out, as well as share. I'll share some examples here too. So as an empowering belief, I would say I'm Coast-Fi and I can choose to make a temporary decision, right? To earn less. And I can pay attention to how it goes and how it feels. And if I get to a point where I feel like I need to pinch pennies, then I'm going to go to the evidence and I'm going to look at the numbers, right? And I'm going to check in with it to see how it's feeling. And then I can adjust if I need to. Right. And so that's how I might articulate an empowering belief for this one. Connie, if you have anything that you want to add, I definitely would encourage you to put that in the comments section here. I'll jump back to that after I go over to the next limiting belief. So the next limiting belief, this one is pretty similar to the one that I said, like, I don't deserve to be happy when other people in the world are suffering. Right. And so Reese says, the limiting belief is I don't deserve to have money, nice things, or a life of my choosing. Right. And so as we go through these strategies, right, I would start with flip the script and I would say, I absolutely deserve to have money, nice things, and a life of my choosing. If you don't believe that that's true, right, after flipping the script, then let's talk about the evidence. Okay. So then I would ask, what is the evidence that you don't deserve money, nice things, or a life of your choosing? Right? Do you have evidence that you don't deserve that? Do you have evidence that you do deserve those things? Okay. And then with this one, I would dive into questions, right? I would ask, why do you believe that you don't deserve to have money or nice things, or the life that you want? Like, what's actually behind that? For me, I think I felt like, when I was really struggling with this limiting belief, I felt it was this like guilt, for like having privilege and having, a lot of this, like, growing up in a place where I had access to a good education and that I had access to healthcare and I never went hungry when I was a kid. And, like there's so many things with that. And right, the one thing that I thought about with that, and I learned a lot as I was learning about privilege and like how do we actually respond and react, right, to realizing that we have that privilege, that like guilt and shame is only a helpful emotion in so much as it allows us to make a change that's actually impactful. Right. And one thing that I learned actually from someone who wrote an article about sort of unpacking white privilege. Is she described two different types of privilege. So one being positive privileges, which are these are the things that we want everyone to have. And the fact that you have this does not take away from someone else having it. Right. And then there's negative privilege, which is sort of upholding this, this hierarchy, right? That like one person has more and therefore someone else has less. Right. So I would think about, like, I try to think about it as, okay, are these things that I want positive privileges, right? Do you deserve, right? I think that every single person deserves to have financial stability and the financial and enough stability and freedom that allows them to pursue the things that they want to in life, to have, right, access to everything that they want. And when you can have the life of your choosing, you can often have a greater impact on the world around you. And that's something that I found, is that I didn't feel like I deserved it. And so I was constantly giving of myself, giving until I didn't have anything left. And then I had a mental breakdown and started experiencing severe burnout and severe anxiety. And then I wasn't able to actually do anything that was helping the world. Right. And so, and one other thing that I heard from someone was like, particularly when we experience guilt and when our response to guilt is like to over function, right? That leads to burnout, which then often means that we can't address the thing that we would want to in the long term anyway, because we aren't taking care of ourselves. Okay. And so I would think of this as taking care of yourself. Right. And so one way I might articulate this as an empowering belief is I deserve to thrive. Every single person deserves to thrive. And I deserve to have the money, the resources, and the life that I want to be able to have an impact on the world. And I can do it in a way that's not taking away from others' ability to also have those same things. Okay, so that's how I would work through that one. Going back to the previous one, Connie says, I think if the math is mathing, then I should go for it. Awesome, Connie. I'll say I'll reach out to you and hold you accountable for that, to make sure that you're going to take action if the math is mathing. Yeah, and then I'm seeing a few other limiting beliefs here around wanting to volunteer more. And so, yeah. So Kristen sharing that she needs to keep working so she can give more to charity. Whereas Connie was saying part of the reason for wanting to reduce hours is so she can give more of her time rather than money, which is also an important thing to do as well. So thank you all for sharing that. Okay, so what I want to do now is what we've been waiting for. I'm going to invite Jess to join me on the screen. And I want to thank Jess for being here. So I was chatting with Jess the other day, and she was telling me about the limiting belief that she was experiencing. And I was like, hey, I would love for you to come on this live call so that people can sort of watch and listen as we work through this together. Because I feel like the one that Jess is experiencing is one I've experienced and so many of us have experienced, that I'm really excited for you to see this process, and I think you're going to learn a lot from it. So thank you, Jess, for being here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. So I'll start off by sharing what you shared with me and a little more context about the limiting belief, and then we can talk, sort of working through the strategies. So what you shared with me by email was, even though we have plenty of savings, I feel like I shouldn't spend money on fun things until my income is higher. A couple of weeks ago, I used the last of my favorite perfume, and I debated for more than a week if I should get more. It was only $20 that lasts for a really long time, but I felt so much resistance to spending the money. So Jess, I one, applaud you for sharing this limiting belief, and also know that you are 100% not alone in this, especially amongst people who have done things to scale back their income, right? It's it's almost a very similar thing to what Connie was worried about, right? She's sort of projecting ahead, like what if I do start to feel this way? Excuse me. And so this is a really common one. So I put the limiting belief here as the core of it, as I shouldn't spend money on fun things until my income is higher. Would you say that that's accurate?
I think so. And then also, once we look for the evidence, there might even be another limiting belief kind of as a base to that, another layer. And I recognize the should in the statements too. So that's a big red flag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's a really great point, that whenever we say something that has a should in it, that's a really good indication that might be a limiting belief, and it might be some sort of external obligation, or someone telling you, in your brain, this person is telling me, something different. So Jess, how would you start with strategy one? How would you flip the script on this one?
Yeah. So without going all the way to an empowering belief, just flipping it, it's okay to spend money on fun things while I'm building my income. So I started a new business last year. It takes a while to, replace the income I had with my corporate job. So it's okay to spend money on fun things while I'm building my business.
Yeah. And so the question that I usually ask at this point, which I know is, you flipped it. Do you just believe that that's true?
I could dip my toe into the pond of it. I kind of, yeah, a little bit. We'll put it that way, a little bit.
Yeah, but then it sounds like moving through some of the other strategies will be helpful.
Yes.
So then the next strategy is evidence. So what evidence do you have that you shouldn't spend money on fun things until your income's higher?
I was thinking about this, and like everything, it goes back to childhood. I was thinking we grew up pretty modestly and didn't have a lot of money. And there were times when I would think about my family spending money, and I'm like, oh, they shouldn't do that, because later we would be broke. And I would even as a kid, I would always save my money. If I got $5 for my birthday, I would still have it on my next birthday. So I always had this kind of a, not even frugal, but more like a scrimping mindset. So I think that's coming out. So there is maybe a little bit of evidence for, just because I would see people in my family spending money and then being broke.
Yeah. So one reason why I love to ask, what's the evidence that your limiting belief could be true? Because the follow-up question to that is, what's different about your life than the situation that you're thinking of?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm not that same person. I'm not a 7-year-old holding on to $5. It's a much different situation. We've got our savings. My husband's still working full time at his job, and I do have an income. It's just not the the corporate income that I had before.
Right. Not the corporate software developer income.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
nice
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah,
that I
for
hated,
sure.
by the way. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So we talked about the evidence for. What's the evidence against? So, what's the evidence that you could spend money on fun things now?
yeah, well, it's been almost a little over a year since I started my business, and our savings has mostly gone up. We even had to replace our furnace this like last month, and it's fine. The nothing terrible happened. We're okay, and yeah, so that's some evidence.
Okay, that's great. So it sounds like what you have in like your emergency savings is up. And then also from what I know about you, I think that you and your spouse are Coast-Fi. Is
Yeah,
that right?
I wanted to hit that number before I put in my notice, and so I got like a nice end of year bonus, and I put in my notice, and we
Yeah.
from there.
Okay, so you are Coast-Fi. So you collectively in your household, then that means that what you would only actually need to cover your actual costs to take care of like future Jess and Joey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some of those midterm goals, like if we wanted to move or take a big trip or
Mhm.
something, we'd have to pay for that.
Yep, exactly. So you would need to generate income to cover your midterm goals and your actual, yearly expenses.
Exactly.
Yeah. And are you able to do that currently?
Yes, that's the tricky
Okay.
thing. Like it's been fine.
Okay. So I want to get into some of the questions then, because I feel when I heard this limiting belief, I was like, I wonder if there's something behind it. Because one thing that I think is like sometimes when our limiting beliefs are about money, it's like it's actually masking something that's a little bit deeper. Like it's easier to say my limiting belief is about money than my limiting belief is about like something else that I'm not going to put words in your mouth. So I actually am curious. So like you have all the evidence in the world that like you currently have enough to be able to like future Jess and Joey are taken care of, right? You're going to have a comfortable traditional retirement and you're covering your expenses, right? And able to cover your, and the things that you're thinking about that are like your midterm goals. And you are starting a new business that is growing, right? And will continue to grow over time. So I'm actually curious if we took off the until my income is higher, if like is there any other reason why you feel like you shouldn't spend money right
Yeah,
now?
like removing that until my income is higher. I think that hit the nail on the head. I feel like this limiting belief has been with me for a very long time that I just shouldn't spend money on fun things. I should only spend money on necessities. And I hear that should over and over. Yeah, I should only spend money on necessities and not fun things. That's been with me.
Okay, and where does that one come from?
Yeah, I think I've felt that since childhood. And then once I started learning about fire, that was a huge message in the fire community. You should eat beans, you should like grind your own spices, everything should be from scratch, no indulgences. And I think that's still rattling around in my head even after kind of evolving from that. I feel like it's still with me.
And okay, so on that front, like it sounds like that part of the belief is something that you don't actually want to believe anymore.
Yeah, I even
Yeah.
some of the
What?
fire traditionalists, it seems like they're kind of bending their own rules. Like, what is the
Mhm.
goal to retire with $1 billion, or is the goal to have a nice life? So yeah, I see
Mhm.
some evidence there that even the hardcore people
Mhm.
are a little more flexible than maybe they used to be.
Yeah. And then so One other thing that I was thinking about too, and I don't want to like project this on to you, but I felt like I had some of this as well when my spouse was continuing to work full time, right? And I had scaled back. Right. So, and it's interesting because I don't think that I recognized this as a limiting belief until like I got so like a nasty blog comment that was like, you are not pulling the weight in your partnership and blah, 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 you know? And then at that point, I was like, I recognized it and was like, that's bullshit. And let me tell you all the reasons why. Right. Cause I'm, rebellious and don't tell me something and I will refute you. But I was actually believing it, right, for myself until that happened. And I'm actually curious, like, do you, do you, does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I think I identify that with that. Like my husband, he's the one who's got the most income right now. He can spend money. Like he likes his Monster Energy drinks. They're like $2 a can. He gets them a couple times a week. I think he deserves it because never mind the health issues, but it's fine for him to indulge in these things like that. But for me, I'm like, well, I didn't earn it. I feel like I'm spending his money. And actually, we talked about it, and he's like, no, he doesn't feel that way. It's just me. So yeah.
Yeah.
That,
So, well, and that's great. And that sort of brings you a little bit into the sixth strategy of like building your community, right? So for me, part of it was like I needed to actually talk to Corey and say like, like I'm feeling like I should be contributing more. And he's like, no, like everything. And it was helpful. The way that he was talking about it was like everything that we have is like all the income generated each year is like we are collectively generating that income as a unit. Right. And one thing that he said to me at the time that was really helpful was like, sure, I'm generating the money, like more of the money right now, but like you're building the life that we want in the future. Like you're putting the investment in to build that life so that he doesn't have to keep, working traditionally at his 9 to 5. And so to me, that was a really helpful thing to hear, to say, to have it be like, okay, I want to think about this as we're collectively generating this income as a unit. Right. And we're both contributing, right, to our household in slightly different ways right now. And I'm making an investment in building the life that we want. Right. And so you choosing, I mean, right, this is me getting on my soapbox a little bit, but like I truly think that like you choosing to make this decision to leave the corporate world, reduce your income, start your business doing something that you're really passionate about, with your art, that like that's making your spouse's life better for sure. So
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like every day we wake up, we're like in a better mood. And sometimes I think about the alternative universe where I still go to work. And today's Wednesday, I probably wouldn't have even been home from the office by now because I would always get home late
Mhm.
Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So yeah, it's so much better. And that's a good point too,
Mhm.
because that was part of the reason I made this choice was because I was so unhappy and we didn't really see each other. We never had days off together. So yeah, things are so much better now.
Mhm. So Jess, I want to ask you what would you say now? Like, how would you, if you were turning it around and articulating an empowering belief, what is it?
I would say that I've been careful with my money up to this point, and it's okay to have indulgences that yeah, I don't want to like go off rails, but I'm not sure how to phrase
Mhm.
it to say like I can have indulgences within like a certain
Yeah.
boundary and it's totally fine.
I
Like I'm
wonder
not
if
gonna,
it's,
yeah.
yeah, and I wonder if it's saying like, I will be intentional with my
Mm,
spending and I will choose to spend money on the things that I value. And I will continue to choose to not spend money on the things that I don't value. Um, and I wonder if there's like something about like that you can trust yourself, that you're going to make like good long-term decisions for yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like we got the big things, right? Like our house, our vehicle, we got our savings and everything's solid there. So these little $20 things that come up rarely, maybe once a month I'll want to spend $20 and I'll feel that resistance, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So it sounds like the empowering belief is you can spend money on fun things and that you can trust yourself to make good decisions about when you're, want and be intentional about the things that you do spend money on.
And that feels true. Like skipping to step 5. Yeah. That's feeling true. Yeah.
Cool. So, okay. So Connie asks, I'm on the edge of my seat. Did you buy the perfume?
It came in the mail right before this call. I kid you not, 20 minutes before I got on screen, I was using my little roller ball. So yes,
awesome.
I got
Okay,
it.
so Jess, that was step 5. So that was you tested your empowering belief and you bought the perfume. Does taking action on it, the fact that you actually did it, like, does that make you feel a little bit more like the empowering belief is actually true?
Yeah. And at the end of the month, so yesterday, I always do the budget. And you know what? The budget was fine. Even with that little perfume purchase on there, it was totally fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Jess, thank you so much for joining me for this today. I hope that all of you who are listening in got to see how this process went, so that you can do it more for yourself. And one thing that I want to mention is I am currently offering a free resource. So it's a 6-day email course focused on limiting beliefs. And so it's going to walk you through and provide you with worksheets and, all of the things to start to identify your different limiting beliefs and then prompt you to work through each of these steps of the process. Okay, so I would encourage you to sign up for that course to get some accountability to actually start working through that process. And then as part of that course, I would encourage anybody to share additional limiting beliefs with me. And I'm planning on creating more videos, right? So they might be, short, like 5 or 10-minute videos where I talk about different ones, but I will respond back and, share my ideas for every single one of your limiting beliefs. Okay. So I would encourage you to do that. And Corey just dropped the email course into the comment section. So to join it, it's just thefioneers.com/email-course. It's that easy. So I would definitely encourage you to check that out. And then before we go, I actually want to go out to you and I want to hear, what did you learn from this conversation today? And what action will you take as a result of this? And while I'm waiting for responses to come in, I will say we have been running this YouTube channel for about a year now. So we actually started it last May when we were on our van trip. And right now if you see my background, I'm traveling in my camper van. We're in southern Utah this week. And I would encourage you, we have a bunch of content on there. I would encourage you to, if you enjoyed this video, to hit like on it and subscribe to the channel so that more people hear about our videos, as well as you'll be notified when we have new content that comes out. So you can check that out as well. So Jess, I'm curious. I'm going to ask you and put you on the spot. What did you learn from this conversation and what action are you going to take?
You know, it's funny because I went through the steps already myself, just kind of like in my head, trying to flip the script and asking for evidence, and it still didn't feel true. So I learned
Mhm.
that it really helps to get that outsider perspective because once you started asking questions and even kind of repeating my own words back to me, I'm like, oh, that's what that sounds like, or so yeah, just
Mhm.
having someone to talk
Yeah.
to about this made it so much better.
Yeah, I find that to be really true for myself. Like when I am like, tying myself up in knots, like, oh, with these limiting beliefs, it's like so helpful to talk to Corey or reach out to, my business BFF or, my mastermind group or, because people, yeah, because I'm my own worst critic. Like, even if I'm trying to be compassionately curious with myself, it's hard. So yeah, I really like that one. One comment that we got here from Katrina. So Katrina learned that how sly limiting beliefs are, how they live in the shadows, and bringing them into the light, addressing them, brings freedom. And Katrina signed up for the email course. So I'll make another plug for that. Sign up for that. Um, and from Marion, we hear if a 1 year walkabout or 1 year of nomadic traveling is scary, maybe scale it to 6 months or 3 months, right? You could do an experiment, right? You could do 3 months or 6 months as a test and build up, to those things over time. And right, you can add to your travel fund and all of those things. So there's a bunch of options and ways to start to problem solve some of those things. Um, let's see, from Connie, been forwarding limiting beliefs emails to your spouse. Good. So you're sending the info forward, and that's a great thing too. So if you know someone who could benefit from this content, I would definitely please encourage you to share this with them. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you, Jess, for being a very awesome participant in this conversation and sharing, your insights and your struggles. That's really hard to do. And thank you to everyone for being here. And I'll end this in the same way I end everything by just encouraging you to go and enjoy the journey.
Thank you. This was really helpful.